Welcome to From the Den podcast, providing Bears and NFL fans alike with compelling news, discussion, and debate. I'm your co-host Benjamin, joined alongside my dear friend and co-host Oren.
Hey Benjamin, let's get right into it. As always, kickoff starts now.
If the Bears had taken a different QB, either Watson or Mahomes, do you think their team would have been more successful? Now, of course, upon first hearing that, you're probably thinking, well, of course, because they're both better quarterbacks than Trubisky. However, let me remind you that Khalil Mack was only traded to the Bears because the Raiders thought the Bears were a worse team than the Packers. And if Mahomes or Watson were on the Bears at that point and the Bears had a very good record, then Khalil Mack might not have ended up being on this team and instead traded to the Packers.
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I still think having Watson or Mahomes on this team, taking out Khalil Mack, would still make them so elite for the fact that if you look at it, quarterback is just such an important position that Watson right now, he led a team that's not amazing. They have a terrible offensive line. They had one really good player in DeAndre Hopkins. Their defense was average, but
they did have J.J. Watt.
They did have J.J. Watt, but J.J. Watt's been injured a lot. He didn't even play, or I think he played less than half the season last year.
And Jadeveon Clowney a few years ago. I mean, their defense has been pretty good.
Yeah, but Jadeveon Clowney wasn't there last year, and Deshaun Watson, I wouldn't say single-handedly, but with some help, led their team to the divisional round where he lost to Mahomes, and now if you imagine Mahomes on their team, Mahomes has a good team. Their defense, I would say, is middle of the pack. Their offense is pretty solid. They have an average offensive line. They didn't have great running backs. Their tight end, they have a great coach, great tight end, and great receivers. But my point is that Mahomes was able to lead the Chiefs to a Super Bowl without a roster like the Bears. I think the Bears roster is better than the Chiefs.
I don't know if I agree with that at all.
I think so. I think that if you take out Mahomes and you take out Trubisky, I think that the Bears
definitely not offensive roster.
No, I agree. The Chiefs' offensive roster is better.
Way better.
Their defensive roster is way better than the Chiefs.
That is true. That's an interesting question.
I think that if you go look at it, I think that if you had Mahomes on this team, it would just elevate them to such a great level that I think that they would have, even if their defense played poorly. And also, let's not forget that in 2017, they were a top 10 defense without Khalil Mack. And they got Kyle Fuller had a great year in 2018. He elevated his game. Eddie Jackson went from a solid player to a all-pro.
Well, you don't know if those players would have been as good without Khalil Mack with them.
You're right. They probably wouldn't have been as good, but they still would have elevated their game to a really high point. And let's not forget that Akeem Hicks elevated his game. They didn't have Roquan Smith on their defense. They added him. My point is that their defense, I think, would have still been the top 10 defense, and their offense would have been top 10. Imagine Mahomes with a good running back in Jordan Howard, with Allen Robinson, Taylor Gabriel, Trey Burton, a solid offensive line. I think that their offense, maybe on paper, in 2018, would have been not as good, but it's not that far off from the Chiefs' offense in 2018. It really isn't. And I know that that's a huge.
That's a little crazy, Oren. That is a little crazy. The Chiefs have Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Tyreek Hill is a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. Travis Kelce is arguably the greatest tight end in the NFL right now. So I don't know if I can even make the comparison between the two offenses. I could agree with you that Patrick Mahomes would elevate this offense and would have pretty good weapons, but I don't think it's anywhere near the weapons that he has in Kansas City.
Yeah, I do.
Another thing you have to take into account in this question is this is assuming that Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes will play at the exact same level on the Bears that they have been on the Texans and the Chiefs. While equally as likely, they could have been a bust or not lived up to their full potential because maybe part of their success is due to the players surrounding them and the coaches surrounding them, though Bill O'Brien doesn't have such a great reputation.
Yeah, so I think, honestly, Deshaun Watson, I think that he's a player that is he would be good wherever. I think Mahomes is different. I think Mahomes has all the skills in the world, and he needed a really, really good coach to harness them and be able to take them out and be able to really show them.
I
And
agree with that. I think Mahomes was a raw prospect coming out of college, and Andy Reid had faith that he could turn Mahomes into an MVP player, which is exactly what happened. So, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that Mahomes, I'm not sure he would have been as good, but I still think that a coach can only elevate a player's game so much. And the fact that Mahomes is so dominant, I can't imagine a scenario where even with a bad coach, Mahomes would be bad. So that's the reason why I say it would be better. Also, the Bears get back two first-round picks. So having 2 first-round picks, what do they do with those picks? Get another right guard to replace Kyle Long. Last year they could have, I don't know, they could have filled another need. Maybe they could have filled a defensive need. They could have got a running back early. They could have picked Josh Jacobs. And I agree that I think that Dave Montgomery is very good, but I think Josh Jacobs is better. And I think that the team could have been elevated to a way higher level if they drafted Mahomes. But I think that that's kind of an obvious thing to say.
If you enjoyed this episode of From the Den, please remember to subscribe, comment, and like this video.
Or, if you're a Packers fan, remember to dislike and leave a nasty comment. Click the links on the screen to access additional content.